The stories we tell from generation to generation, is it a ball of truth or sprinkled with innovation? You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my Foul Play February series. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's video is going to be about the Oakville Blobs. Now this one is going to baffle you so much, not only because it sounds absurd, but also because by the end of it, you're going to be thinking that it quite possibly could be true. But the awful thing is, we may never have this one solved. By the way, I'm posting every single day this month. There will be a playlist down below if you've missed any, and make sure to subscribe and thumbs up if you want me to continue, and come back tomorrow if you want to. Now let's get back to the story. It began in a town of Oakville, Washington, which had a population of 665. That's right, less than 1,000 residents in the area. And it was obviously a very tiny place to be as well. But the residents here, they knew rain like the back of their hand. It rained there all of the time. They weren't like those Los Angeles residents that freak out anytime it rains because they're not used to it and can't even drive in it. They basically were pros at it. They knew exactly how to handle it. But then one day, something different happened, and it would change the way they would look at rain forever. It was August 7th, 1944, and it began raining. But they should have been afraid of it that day, because it wasn't raining water. Tiny, translucent, gelatinous globs were falling from the sky, and it began at around 3 a.m. that morning. They were the size of a grain of rice, and it was happening about a 20 square mile radius around the town, and nobody knew why. Or did they? There's a theory that someone did, but we'll get to that later. And early that morning, an officer named David Lacey was out doing his rounds, driving around, when he noticed that it started raining, and he put on his windshield wipers, as you do. But instead of it helping, it just smeared a goo-like substance across his windshield. He pulled over and he got out to look at it, and it was mushy. And he began looking around, and he noticed that these little globs were everywhere. He put on his gloves and he began to pick one up, and it almost squished between his fingers, as if it was jello falling from the sky. A sweet little old lady in the area named Dottie Heron was out taking her dogs out that morning when she noticed this substance on the porch, and she thought that it was hail at first. It was little tiny ice looking things. It was a little translucent white color, and she just figured it was hail that she hadn't heard. Except when she picked one up, it squished between her fingers as well, and she automatically knew something was wrong. But later that day, the police officer, David Lacey, he actually went to the hospital or the doctor's office because he began to feel very ill. Not only was he dizzy, but he could hardly breathe. He wondered if this had anything to do with the strange globs, but he didn't want to sound crazy, so he didn't say anything. But also at that time, the resident, Dottie, who had picked up this little glob on her porch, began to get very nauseated and super dizzy. And by that afternoon, when her children got there to check on her, her children were adults, but they went to check on her, she was on the ground, pale, cold, and sweating, and she had been throwing up the entire day. They rushed her to the hospital, where she had to stay for 3 days, and they said that all it was simply an ear infection. Dottie's daughter had this eerie feeling that something was very wrong, and it wasn't just an ear infection, and so she decided to take some of the globs from her mother's house to the hospital just to have them check it. And a lab technician found something extremely strange. When testing these globs, he found human white blood cells within it. He couldn't explain why, and he knew nothing else. And that is when it was sent to the Washington State Department of Health to do more tests. And there they found that it also contained a bacteria that was commonly found in human digestive systems. They as well knew no more than that. They could not figure out what this substance was and how in the world it fell from the sky like rain. But it did so over a period of 3 weeks, raining 6 more times. Residents in the area began getting violently ill, and they would stay ill from 7 weeks to 3 months with this nausea and this blurring of their vision, dizziness, just quite a strange illness. It was said that a large number of cats and dogs who were outside when it would rain would become sick and pass away, and one including Dottie's kitten. But that's when the theories began to come into play. People began to say that possibly it was a passing airplane that had dumped its waste mid-flight, and this was possibly just waste from the airplane. But the FAA came forward saying that they make all airplanes dye the waste blue, and these globs were translucent to the core. There was no color whatsoever, and so they completely ruled that one out. But it was a year later and they still had no answers. Dottie fortunately became better, and she had kept a kind of a bowl of glob that had fell from the sky in her fridge, and she took it to a lab herself to get it tested once again. And this test revealed that it had a eukaryotic cell, meaning that it had once been alive, and many thought it was an animal. Some even believed that the Air Force was testing different bombs in the ocean, and they had come across a colony of star jellyfish in the Pacific Ocean. And when this bomb erupted, it sent all of these jellyfish in pieces over onto the land in Oakville as though it was raining. But the Air Force denied any involvement in it whatsoever, even though they did confirm they were doing tests at the time. But residents of the area had an even deeper theory with that, because they said right before this rain began, they had seen multiple different military aircraft flying over their little town. They were all black, and it was either bombers or helicopters, and they obviously made quite a loud noise, and people noticed them for it being such a random area, that doesn't see much. And so they really noticed it and honed in on it, and some believed that that aircraft, or some of them, had dropped these globs over this town on purpose, singled them out completely. And the most common theory was that this was some sort of biological experiment to weaponize a substance and to test it out over a small town that wouldn't affect too many people if it went wrong. Because you see, if something like this were to happen and they would need to use some sort of biological weapon somewhere in another country, they want to make sure it works. But to do that, they needed to test it. So what do? They take it to a tiny town where they have the least casualties that they could possibly have in case something goes very wrong. I didn't get an exact count on how many died, on if any actual humans died, only that the animals did. But the unfortunate thing is this may never be solved, because all of the globs are now gone. There is nothing more to test. But is this story even true? I'm sure you were thinking that from the very beginning, and so was I. It sounds completely out there, and of course, if there are conspiracy theorists, there are always going to be the ones who try to debunk it, and there were, in this case, those people. And they found that on the reports, these blobs were reported to not have nuclei, meaning they weren't white human blood cells. And there was also no mention of any sort of bacteria from our digestive systems. There was also no knowledge of if this plague ever really did happen with all of these people getting sick in Oakville, other than some of the residents' testimonies, which they have gone on camera for. There was an Unsolved Mysteries on this, and they went on saying that this did happen, that they did get sick, many people in the area did, but other than that, there is none from back when it actually happened that was written out. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. And Dottie's cat, which she said was killed by this rain, was found to have intestinal problems before this even happened, and some say that that's the reason her cat died, but nobody really knows for sure, and she says that it was the rain. Now there was a picture that I put in the thumbnail and I'll put here that circulated around as far as what these globs looked like, and everybody, of course, when you see a picture like that, and I'm sure you did too, you were like, oh my gosh, there's picture proof. And that's what a lot of people thought. But it said that that was completely debunked and that this picture is actually of northwestern salamander eggs, and it was not the globs at all. But do you believe this theory? Do you think this is some crazy unsolved mystery, or simply a story that has gone throughout the years, an urban legend of sorts? I don't know. When I saw the unsolved mysteries on it, it just kind of made it more real, and the people talking about it really just seemed like normal people who were talking from experience rather than needing fame or coming up with something crazy. But of course, anything could be staged, and you can't be too sure of anything in this world. So who really knows? But Oakville, in honor of this, actually thought about making a jellyfish festival where they would all go to the bars and drink the jellyfish drink, which had vodka, gelatin, and juice in it, to kind of, you know, honor what had happened and to keep the story alive, or, you know, the experience alive. But I would really love to know your thoughts on this, and if you think this was some crazy biological military experiment that they tried on this small town. I mean, we went over the Pont Saint-Esprit one. I'll link it down below if you want to watch that, because that one was crazy. It was like a small village that this happened to, and nobody really knows what happened there either, so I don't think it's too far out there to think that this could happen, but I think it would be very, very risky to do, especially because, well, I guess back then it wouldn't have really made, you know, social media news because there wasn't really anything like that back then. But nowadays, if they did something like that, it would be everywhere. They would want to see the pictures. People would be posting them all over social media. There would be videos of the rain. So it's much different now, which makes me wonder if, you know, the military or whoever does these experiments, if they really are doing them, what are they going to have to do to step it up with all of these people watching nowadays? Because they may be watching us, but now we can watch them through all of us being connected with these theories, and that makes it even more scary. Yes, we think, okay, now we have the one up because we're talking about this, we see everything, but that just means that they have to hide it even further, meaning it could get even darker, which is even scarier, but I'm not going to scare myself right now. I'm just going to stop there. But yeah, please let me know your theories on this, and if you think that it even happened at all. I would hope that we wouldn't be put through experiments against our will. But in this world, anything can happen, and we know that. So I'll leave it at that. Remember, I am posting every single day this month, and it's like almost over. Like, okay, I guess we have a week left, but I am so happy to be doing this for you guys, and your response means everything to me. You're the kindest people, and you're so kind to each other down in the comments as well, and it just truly means everything to me. So if you're just lurking and you're not subscribed, you want to join this family, so please do so. So don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye. Small towns can seem so innocent, but that can all change with one incident.